Sometimes a player's actions are so reckless, so profoundly selfish, that they don't just tarnish a legacy, they threaten to break the very foundation of the league they play in. We are now seeing the fallout from one of the most shocking mid-season implosions in recent memory. And sources close to the league office suggest the WNBA is being forced to consider a radical, unprecedented solution to a crisis created by one of its own veterans. A solution that's already being called the Bonner Rule. The idea that a player's conduct could be so damaging that an entire rule needs to be created in her name seems unthinkable. But that's the reality the WNBA is now facing. To understand why the league is on the verge of codifying one player's infamy into its official rulebook, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the betrayal that started it all. DeWanna Bonner, a 16-year veteran and a future Hall of Famer, was brought to the Indiana Fever for one specific, highly publicized reason: to be the veteran mentor for the most hyped rookie in sports history, Caitlin Clark. Clark herself was thrilled, publicly calling Bonner a tremendous and selfless leader. She said, "For me, as a second-year point guard, I want to win for her. This is the end of her career. She deserves it." The narrative was set. The wise champion would guide the young phenom. But the reality on the court was a disaster. Bonner's performance fell off a cliff. In her 9 games with the Fever, she averaged a dismal 7.1 points while shooting a career-worst 34.5% from the field, a shadow of her former self. After just 3 games, her struggles were so apparent that coach Stephanie White had no choice but to remove her from the starting lineup. And for a decorated veteran who had been a full-time starter since 2012, this was reportedly a catastrophic blow to her pride. Suddenly, the fit wasn't right anymore. Instead of fighting for her spot, instead of mentoring the young players through adversity, Bonner chose to quit. She abandoned her team, and she abandoned Caitlin Clark, leaving the rookie to navigate the intense, suffocating media pressure completely on her own. She requested a contract divorce, and the Fever, seeing no other option, granted her release. But this wasn't just a player asking for a trade. This was something different, something far more dangerous. And it exposed a loophole in the WNBA's foundation so big, it now threatens the entire structure of the league. So what makes this power play so different, so much more dangerous than anything the league has seen before? To put it simply, other stars have forced their way out, but none have ever done it like this. In professional sports, there's a playbook for a disgruntled star. Look at WNBA legend Sylvia Fowles in 2015. After a long 7-year tenure with the Chicago Sky, she wanted to play for a contender, so she sat out the first half of the season in a holdout until a complex 3-team trade was orchestrated to send her to Minnesota. It was messy, but in the end, the Chicago Sky got assets in return. It was a transaction. Or look at the case of Lee Ueru earlier this season. She was unhappy with her limited playing time on the Seattle Storm, so she publicly requested a trade. The Storm honored her request and executed a standard professional deal, sending her to the Dallas Wings for future draft picks. That is how the business of sports is supposed to work. Even in a dispute, there is compensation. DeWanna Bonner torched that playbook. She didn't hold out to force a trade that would benefit the Fever. She quit on her contract after just 9 games to force a release, a move specifically calculated to devalue her as a team asset and leave the Indiana Fever with absolutely nothing but an empty roster spot. And the way she allegedly orchestrated this is the very reason the league finds itself in crisis mode. According to multiple insider reports, Bonner and her camp engaged in a brazen act of waiver tampering.
That makes DeWanna Bonner look really, really bad. It makes DB look really, really bad. And it's the fact that she has told all other teams, other than the Mercury, don't sign her.
The goal of this breathtakingly audacious maneuver was to rig the entire system. By allegedly telling every other team not to touch her, she could guarantee she would clear waivers, thereby becoming an unrestricted free agent. That status would grant her the freedom to sign for a cheap, prorated veteran minimum contract with the one team she wanted to go to all along, the Phoenix Mercury. She wasn't just quitting her job, she was allegedly engaging in a conspiracy to subvert the league's fundamental rules to get her way, no matter the cost to the team that had just invested a near maximum salary in her. This was a direct assault on the integrity of player contracts, and it has created a problem that now falls squarely on the shoulders of the smallest, most vulnerable teams in the WNBA. This is where DeWanna Bonner's personal, selfish decision becomes a full-blown league crisis. Her actions have created a doomsday scenario for the WNBA's small market teams, the very franchises that form the backbone of the league. Professional sports leagues don't survive on the strength of just 2 or 3 glamour franchises. They require competitive balance to thrive. For teams like the Indiana Fever, the single most important tool they have for building a roster is the sanctity of a contract. They can't always offer the allure of a big city, but they can offer a guaranteed role and a binding financial commitment. Bonner's power play sets a dangerous precedent that threatens to burn that entire system to the ground. It sends a chilling message to every player in the league. If you're unhappy, you don't have to honor your deal. You can just quit on your team and manipulate the system to land in a more desirable market. The Indiana Fever invested a significant, near maximum portion of their salary cap to sign Bonner, believing she would be a foundational piece to support Caitlin Clark. Her exit turns that investment into a catastrophic loss, and it creates a blueprint for other unhappy players to follow, potentially turning contracts into meaningless suggestions and throwing the league's stability into chaos. If there was any doubt about how toxic Bonner's exit truly was, you don't need to listen to the fans. You just need to listen to the one group that matters most, her fellow players. Or more specifically, listen to their silence. In professional sports, there's an unwritten code. Players, especially fellow union members, often stick together during disputes with management. But in the wake of Bonner's abandonment of the Fever, nothing. A deafening, league-wide silence from her peers. No one came to her defense. No one endorsed her decision. This was not a coincidence. This was a verdict. Her peers, the very women who understand the pressures of the game better than anyone, delivered a quiet condemnation. The consensus analysis is that they did not see this as a righteous stand for player empowerment. They saw it as a selfish act that violated the trust of her teammates and the professionalism of the sport. And that silent verdict from the players is the fuel on the fire, forcing the WNBA to seriously consider creating a rule to ensure this can never, ever happen again. So, what would a Bonner rule actually look like? If the league is truly going to step in and prevent this sort of chaos from ever happening again, it can't just be a slap on the wrist. It has to be a fundamental change to the rules of player conduct. Based on the loopholes Bonner so brazenly exposed, we can speculate on what this new legislation might entail. First, you have to make the financial penalty a true deterrent. DeWanna Bonner voluntarily forfeited an estimated $120,000, a massive sum for most people, but for her, it was apparently just the cost of doing business to get what she wanted. A new rule would need to be much, much harsher. We could be talking about new contract language that forces a player who quits mid-season to not only forfeit their remaining salary, but also pay back a significant portion of their signing bonus, or even forfeit future playoff shares for years to come. The financial sting has to be so severe that no player would even contemplate it. Second, and most critically, you have to directly address the alleged waiver tampering. The Bonner rule would almost certainly need to include a clause that triggers an automatic and immediate league investigation if a veteran player on a large contract clears waivers under suspicious circumstances, just as Bonner did. If credible evidence is found that a player or their agent instructed other teams not to place a claim, the consequences would need to be catastrophic. Lengthy suspensions, crippling fines, and perhaps even the loss of future draft picks for the team that colluded with them. You have to remove any incentive to cheat the system. But creating such a rule forces the WNBA to walk a very fine tightrope and confront a conflict that's at the very heart of modern professional sports: player empowerment versus league integrity. We are in an era where athletes are rightfully taking more control of their careers and their futures. But the Bonner situation forces us all to ask, where is the line? When does empowerment become entitlement? When does fighting for what you want become a reckless abandonment of your professional commitments that harms the entire ecosystem? The WNBA and the Players Association now have the unenviable task of answering that question, finding a way to protect the contracts that form the bedrock of their league without stripping players of their hard-won rights. And while the league office grapples with these massive philosophical questions about its own rules, the Bonner case has one more deeply personal and complicating factor, an element that suggests this entire crisis may have been premeditated from the very beginning. Because the desired destination in this whole saga, the Phoenix Mercury, just happens to be the home of all-star forward Alyssa Thomas, who is publicly known to be DeWanna Bonner's fiancée. This isn't just a player wanting to go to a new team. This is a player allegedly trying to force a reunion, and according to widespread speculation, using the Indiana Fever as a pawn to do it. This personal relationship is the central pillar of the premeditated conspiracy theory that has taken over the narrative. The theory posits that Bonner signed her lucrative $200,000 contract with the Fever with no genuine intention of ever fulfilling it. Instead, she was simply biding her time, collecting paychecks and soaking up the media exposure from the Caitlin Clark effect, all while waiting for the Phoenix Mercury to clear up just enough salary cap space to sign her for a fraction of her salary. The financial gymnastics required to make it happen just underscore how desperate the move was. This adds a toxic layer of potential collusion to the entire affair and presents yet another fire the league has to put out. A Bonner rule can't just address quitting or tampering. It must also consider how to police situations where personal relationships could be seen as influencing player movement in a way that completely undermines the integrity of contracts and the league's competitive balance. In the end, DeWanna Bonner got her move to Phoenix, but at what cost? She torched a Hall of Fame reputation, is accused of conspiring to rig the system, and will now be remembered not as a champion, but as the player who quit on Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Her actions have backed the WNBA into a corner. A response is no longer a choice, it's a necessity. Her legacy, whether she likes it or not, will now and forever be tied to the crisis she single-handedly created, and the rule that will almost certainly bear her name. The damage, however, extends far beyond a single player's tarnished legacy or a new line in the league's rulebook. The shockwaves from DeWanna Bonner's decision are now crashing against the WNBA's newfound mainstream success, threatening the very brand identity the league has worked so hard to build, an identity that was finally reaching a new stratosphere. Bonner did make one feeble attempt to reclaim the narrative after her exit. She posted a defiant message on her personal Instagram account, lashing out at her critics, stating, "A quitter. Nah, never been that. But when the time comes, let's just make sure the apologies are just as loud as the disrespect." It was a clear attempt to reframe herself as the victim, a respected veteran who was somehow wronged by the Indiana Fever organization. But this narrative was dead on arrival, not only because it was vague, but because it directly contradicted the sanitized professional statement she had released just hours earlier.
And look, I understand that's where she wants to go. Why didn't she go there in the summer? We know why, because she couldn't have got her max contract. And by the way, people are like, oh, they can give her the minimum. No, they can't. The Phoenix Mercury can give her a prorated $80,000 salary for the rest of the year. So she's only going to lose about 30K-ish. I think she's only going to lose, she's going to lose about 40, 50K. Whereas they would have been only able to sign her earlier on. Well, they would only be able to sign her for nothing. Because again, we can't forget as well, the Phoenix Mercury cut Sevgi Uzun. The Phoenix Mercury have a bunch of players signed on hardships and a bunch of players that they can cut. Like they literally cap space magicked up. And as soon as cap space magics up for the India or for the Phoenix Mercury.
That polite, amicable statement about a fit not working out was impossible to square with her later, more aggressive post about disrespect. More importantly, her claims were completely overshadowed by the cold, hard facts that had already become public knowledge. She was benched for poor play. She quit on her team after just 9 games. She abandoned the league's biggest star, and she voluntarily forfeited over $120,000 to do it. The public saw through the spin and her attempt to control the story failed spectacularly. This reputational damage will likely haunt her long after her playing days are over, potentially torpedoing post-career opportunities in coaching or broadcasting. But the bigger problem is the one now facing the WNBA itself. The league is in a period of explosive growth, fueled almost entirely by the Caitlin Clark effect. Millions of new casual fans are tuning in for the first time. Bonner's unprofessional conduct sends a terrible message about the league's stability. It risks painting the WNBA not as a league of elite competitors, but as a league susceptible to petty, destabilizing drama. A notion that could scare off the very investors and corporate sponsors the league needs to sustain its unprecedented momentum. And while the league office grapples with the public relations nightmare, there's another, largely untold, side to this story. The entire narrative has been built on the assumption that DeWanna Bonner was executing a flawless power play to land on a team that was waiting for her with open arms. The truth, however, is far more complicated. Bonner torched her relationship with the Fever and the rest of the league with the arrogant assumption that Phoenix was a guaranteed safe landing spot. But according to sources, that safe harbor wasn't nearly as welcoming as she believed. The Phoenix Mercury front office was reportedly hesitant and had serious concerns about bringing Bonner into their locker room. And why wouldn't they? Their existing roster, a young, hungry group of players, had completely bought into the system and was overachieving, building positive team chemistry that was the envy of the league. Why would they risk disrupting that fragile ecosystem for a 36-year-old veteran who had just demonstrated a stunning willingness to quit on her team the moment things got tough? It was a massive red flag. Bonner's actions weren't just a problem for Indiana, they were a potential liability for her target destination too. Furthermore, signing Bonner wasn't a simple transaction. It came at a direct human cost to the team she was trying to join. Because their roster was already full, in order to bring Bonner on board, the Phoenix Mercury would be forced to waive another player from their successful and cohesive unit. One of the players who had contributed to that positive chemistry and overachieving record would have to be cut. The decision was not without serious internal consequences and potential for resentment within the Mercury's own locker room. So why did they take the risk? One can only speculate that the pressure exerted by their own star player, Alyssa Thomas, to sign her fiancé was the deciding factor that ultimately overrode the front office's better judgment. The signing becomes less of a strategic basketball move and more of a risky play to appease a current star, introducing a potential ticking time bomb into what had been a stable environment. What happens if Bonner is unhappy with her role in Phoenix? What happens if the player who was cut was a beloved teammate? DeWanna Bonner didn't just escape a bad situation. She may have just created a brand new one. No matter what happens in Phoenix, whether it's a happy homecoming or another slow-motion disaster, the case against DeWanna Bonner for her actions in Indiana is already closed in the court of public opinion. And when you examine her flimsy attempts to justify what she did, it's easy to see why her arguments completely fall apart under the slightest scrutiny. Her official statement blamed a vague, bad fit for the departure. But let's be honest, the fit seemed perfect when she was signing a lucrative $200,000 contract to be the celebrated veteran leader alongside the sport's biggest star. The fit only became a problem the moment she was held accountable for her own poor performance and moved to a reserve role. This was never about a strategic fit. This was about a veteran's pride being wounded after being benched. Then came the cryptic social media post about disrespect. But what disrespect did she actually face? Was it disrespectful for the coaching staff to bench a player shooting a career-worst 34.5% from the field? Was it disrespectful to promote another player, Lexi Hull, who was performing better and gave the team a better chance to win? That's not disrespect. That is accountability. The only true, undeniable disrespect in this entire saga was a 16-year veteran abandoning her young teammates and quitting on the commitment she made to them and to the organization. So let's lay out the irrefutable facts one last time. Bonner underperformed, she was benched, she quit on her team, and was placed on waivers. Now, if any other team in the league had simply claimed her contract,
She said, "I want to sincerely thank the Indiana Fever for the opportunity to be part of the Fever franchise. Despite our shared goals and excitement heading into the season, I felt the fit did not work out, and I appreciate the organization's willingness to grant my request to move on, particularly at this point in my career. I wish the Fever great success as they continue to build around this dynamic group."
She would have kept her entire $200,000 salary for the season, but no team made a claim, reportedly because she or her camp actively told them not to, all so she could rig the system and force a move to Phoenix. This mountain of evidence is precisely why her excuses hold no water, and it's why the league is being backed into a corner where inaction is no longer an option. In the end, this is no longer a story about one player's unhappiness. It has become a crucial test of the WNBA's own strength and stability. DeWanna Bonner's decision to quit on her contract, abandon the sport's biggest star, and allegedly manipulate the system has created a crisis that cannot be ignored. Her actions exposed a dangerous loophole, and whether it's through massive fines, suspensions, or an entirely new set of regulations, the league will be forced to create a deterrent. The Bonner Rule may be an unofficial title for now, but the precedent it represents will inevitably become a permanent part of the league's DNA, forever marking the line between player empowerment and professional chaos. But that's just our breakdown. We want to know what you think. Drop a comment below and let us know. Do you believe the WNBA needs to create a Bonner Rule to stop this from happening again? Or was she entitled to force her way out? Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future updates on this story. And if you think more people need to know what's happening behind the scenes in the WNBA, share this video.